What were some of the challenges with living in San Francisco for several weeks?
Oh, absolutely none. My wife loved it like that. We stayed at the Marriott's over in South San Francisco, and we just had a pretty good time over there. To be honest with you, after getting out of the hospital, in fact, I was really in a point like that. I had a new life, and and it was very rewarding over there like that. We stayed there, I think, 6 weeks altogether like that, and we didn't have a bad adjustment. In fact, we had a very good time.
Well, you got to get used to the airplane noise to start with, because we were down near the airport where we could find a place to stay at the hotel. And just being away from your own house. There's no place like home, when you're sick, and the surroundings that you have. And so it's different being away from your house. So you just can't walk into the kitchen, open the refrigerator door, and see everything that you used to see, or go up and just your regular routine. So
one of the arrangements that a transplant patient makes is to be within 30 miles of the hospital. And in our case, we were very fortunate. We had a friend that lived in Belmont, so we were probably 20 to 30 miles away. So that was not a problem. But the challenge was that, especially at the beginning, there is a lot of testing that's going on, and blood draws. And to me, that was the biggest challenge with the blood draws. It felt like we were doing it every day. And after a while, you start running out of good veins because of all the IVs you've had in the hospital and the constant blood draws that occur when you're in the hospital and then afterwards. So it became, that was probably the most uncomfortable experience, believe it or not, out of the whole process, was the blood draws. Other than that, that was living in the San Francisco area and working our way to San Francisco, the hospital through San Francisco traffic was probably the hardest. So there's the blood draws followed by the traffic issues.
The challenges were very minimal for me. My sister has a house with a one-bedroom apartment downstairs that we converted into my house for 6 weeks. So we were 20 minutes from the hospital at most. So the girls, my daughters, rotated their time between staying in the city, and the rest of my family helped take care of me while I was in the city. So I was very fortunate.
Well, San Francisco traffic is always an issue, for sure. And it's cold here, and that's a problem. Especially when I lost a lot of weight and I had to try to come back and forth to the hospital. I was freezing all the time. And you have to do a lot of follow-up visits as a transplant patient, a lot of labs, and when you come in, you may come in for 1 or 2 things, and they may see something, and next thing you know, you're here the whole day. So I say with being in San Francisco post-transplant, be prepared for the cold, and be prepared to possibly have to be here the whole day in the cold. Those are the main things, and of course the traffic.
My biggest challenge was the walking, because it's so necessary to walk to help your lungs work hard for you, and to be able to breathe that nice big breath in. I remember my first trek across the Embarcadero. We actually stayed in the financial district across from the Embarcadero. We were very fortunate to have an apartment that was owned by friends. And I remember turning around and looking back up at the 8th floor, and I said to my daughter, Bridget, who was forcing me to walk that day, I'm never going to get back. So we walked across the street to the Embarcadero, we had lunch, and I made it back. And I think that was my hardest thing about living in the city. There was nothing really difficult about it. I was close enough to the hospital that our drives were 20 minutes or less. The hospital was very accommodating on times for us to be here, so we never had a traffic problem. We just felt very fortunate to have a place to stay and knowing that the hospital was so close if I needed them.
Well, we didn't live in San Francisco. We had a place at the Residence Inn in South City, And it wasn't that bad. We live in Union City. My sister from back east came out for those 6 weeks. So she stayed with me at times at the Residence Inn. And then my husband would stay home, or he'd come over every day. So it wasn't that bad. It was just, and we could walk. There's a nice walking path around the at the Residence Inn. So it was quite nice. I just didn't like food choices. My sister is not a great cook.
Actually, honestly, there weren't a lot of challenges for me living here. I think the only thing would be traffic, because I come from a really small town with 2 stoplights. So there weren't a lot of challenges. We were staying out in South San Francisco, so we were kind of away from the city, and we could obviously come in if we wanted to go to a movie or something like that, which I didn't really want to go into large groups of people anyways for a long time. So but it was really nice. I enjoyed living in the city because, like I said, I'm from such a kind of small community where there's not a lot going on. So, I don't know, we took advantage of, like, going out to eat. Yeah, it was nice. I actually really liked it, and I was a little sad when I had to go home.
Living in San Francisco for me and my transplant team was wonderful. We actually stayed in my parents' RV in Pacifica, so every morning I got to wake up and see the ocean. Getting to San Francisco was very easy. There's always some challenges with traffic and parking, but it wasn't really anything that was not manageable. And the real upside was it motivated me to get out and take walks and go see things in the city that I've never had a chance to see.
Living in San Francisco for the 6 weeks after surgery, after discharge from the hospital, wasn't difficult in and of itself. It wasn't living in San Francisco, it was living with other people. I live alone, typically, and so I was really concerned about living with 1 or 2 people, because I had a rotating bevy of support people. Living with people in a, 200 square foot hotel room as opposed to my condo alone really concerned me, especially with the prednisone possibly elevating or emphasizing my moods. I'm like, am I going to kill them? Are they going to kill me? How am I going to get these people out of my life? But it turned out to be fine. It was a little confining, but I was overly concerned. And San Francisco can be really expensive, or it can be kind of reasonable. I was in the Residence Inn, so it had it had a kitchen. We could warm up lunch. We could warm up leftovers for dinner. We could cook simple dinners. Breakfast was provided. And I got to see a part of San Francisco that I usually wouldn't have seen. So I got to go to the zoo. We took lots of advantage of Golden Gate Park while we were here at UCSF for appointments. So the Botanical Gardens, the Conservatory of Flowers, the California Academy of Sciences. We found a whole bunch of trails and parks in the peninsula, and went to a whole lot of restaurants in San Bruno that I never would have gone to otherwise. It was fine. San Francisco's a lovely place. I wish I'd have been home, but San Francisco was a lovely place.
Living in San Francisco is kind of a scary thought. I didn't travel that much in San Francisco in the past. But more than anything, it was just moving myself around in the city and knowing what places to go to for groceries, for a place to eat. Unfortunately, my wife is the one that caught most of that pressure. But as a team, I believe we finally figured out ways to make that work for ourselves. But that, to me, was the biggest fear, biggest problem in living in San Francisco after surgery.
The biggest challenge living in San Francisco after the transplant was just being away from home. You feel somewhat better, and you want to be home. That's where you would feel. That being said, it is nice to have the comfort of being very close by after that transplant. But living away from home for 6 weeks is tough. It's a hard challenge to overcome. I think some of the toughest things about living in San Francisco after transplant are finding food you want to get, depending on how close you are, even the travel to the hospital because of traffic and getting used to that so you won't be late even though you're supposed to be fairly close. I think those are the largest two challenges that we experienced.